I always say that it's easy getting money out the door, but it's much more difficult getting it back in. I don't know about you guys, but when I think of a block of flats, I kind of feel like 10 plus is really a block of flats. If you had a 2-unit house, that to me isn't a block of flats, but that would be valued full market value.
They also tried to say we need to send the surveyor back out to site, which we were like, well, this is ridiculous. He's been to site, he's written the valuation. All we're doing is chopping up the individual flats. Why the hell does he need to visit site again? Cool. Block valuations and refinances. So if you tuned in a couple of weeks ago, you'd have got the lowdown of our doctor's surgery conversion, which we've converted into 5 flats. We're letting it out as effectively 14-bed HMO or sort of cluster flats. This is about block valuations and refinancing. This project is now completed and we are actively tenanting it, which we'll find out more about later on. But Jack's going to run through some nuances around valuations when it comes to kind of blocks of flats like this.
Yeah, it's actually season 2, episode 35 that we did the deep dive on this property. The lawyers that are doing the refinance basically asked why we're splitting up the flats. So essentially we carried out a valuation on site, and I'll be talking later actually in the sort of lettings section about this cluster flat development, about how we're getting on with the lettings and how that compares with valuations. But essentially we agreed a GDV for the site. No one in the brokerage side of things that was arranging the finance, or even the financiers or even the valuers, up until the point we got this final report, said that they'll be applying a 15% discount on the whole building because it is a block of flats. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I think of a block of flats, I kind of feel like 10 plus is really a block of flats. I know that 8 units are a block of flats, but I would call that more like a smaller, more consumable asset type that would be share of freehold sales, doesn't necessarily fall into this massive category of management companies, service charge and all of that nonsense. It's just a small scheme, and it's almost crazy that if you had a 2-unit house, that to me isn't a block of flats, but that would be valued full market value. Then as soon as you maybe go into 3, 4 or 5, it is. So certainly something to look out for. So top tip number 1 is make sure that you check their valuation method. We actually did check their valuation method before we started this, but we actually asked if they'd be valuing on bricks and mortar or commercial valuation and roughly what they thought there would be. And they did declare rough valuations, but they didn't disclose that they'll be applying a 15% discount. Now, 15% discount is kind of broken up in their minds. I always say that it's easy getting money out the door, but it's much more difficult getting it back in. So in the scenario, the bank's trying to get the money back in and they take control of the asset, let's assume they repossess the building and they need to realize their capital. To do that, the whole point of a gross development valuation or an existing valuation is the value that they're pegging their value to. So as a 70 or 75% mortgage, they need to basically sell this site and recover that capital ideally. And by all means, they would have to do that. But there's already a 30% buffer between their debt and the value, right? So that buffer is typically selling it or any equity or any second charge that might be left on the asset. This particular asset doesn't have any sort of second charge. It's basically just profit. So that's our loss if this property does get repossessed. But what they're actually looking at here with a 15% discount is they're looking at if they had to take control of the asset and sell it, what would happen? So they would have agents fees, they would have legal fees, they would have administration fees, and they're tagging a 15% on GDV costs to do that, which is absolutely absurd. One of their explanations for this is they've actually said because they would have to split the titles on the building, which is absolutely nonsense. So this asset's worth about 1.25 million. So to think it's going to cost like 45, 50 grand from a legal perspective to split titles is absolutely absurd. The whole point of loan to value is typically in a situation where they need to get rid of the asset, they'll probably get rid of it quite quickly, maybe auction it, and there is a compression on the value, and they do often sell at a lower value than the loan to value. But additional to this, the 15% is ridiculous. So what they're actually doing is they're lending a 70% loan to value on an asset. They've obviously got 30% headroom already, and they're applying a 15% discount on that. So their technical leverage would at that point be 55%. And we're not getting 55% leverage rates. So, I mean, I kind of don't mind if we have something low geared, but I want the benefit of paying lower cost of capital to be at that level and be, call a spade a spade. So essentially, the reason our lawyer was asking about splitting up this morning is because a way to get around this is we just went back to the lender and the valuer and we said, can we value them all on their own merits, all of the flats, and we would split the titles. That's not a lot of aggravation to get that additional real valuation so that the lender can get comfort. And they basically turned around and said, fine, throw a load more fees at us. We're going to split out the valuations. We might need to visit site again, classic stuff. Consultants getting a bit carried away. But we essentially re-agreed that we're going to value the building where it is without a discount. We're going to split them up individually and split the titles. portals. So that will be 5 different applications on 5 flats, but it means we get the valuation we need. So that was kind of like our way around it, but I suppose you can probably try and nip that in the bud a lot sooner. These are the things that you learn. So just be careful what they're trying to do, and also challenge it, because this was our second valuation. The first came in at £1 million. This one came in at 1.075. Without the discount, it's 1.265. If we didn't challenge that, we might have just gone with this valuation, which is leaving a lot of capital or equity or even cost of capital in the deal if we wouldn't have challenged it and found a creative way around it. So definitely challenge things. When our broker sent us the valuation document, the brokerage is a reputable brokerage. It's run by a reputable guy, but his team don't necessarily know to challenge everything. So when they sent this through, they kind of said, here you go, here's the valuation. Should we proceed to get the offers? And I was like, no, hang on a second. This is absurd. So make sure you're leaning on those consultants to be on board to challenge, because you're their client and they should be representing you and getting you the best deals. So make sure you do throw your weight around.
Yeah, nice. I mean, they also tried to say that, we need to send the surveyor back out to site, which we were like, well, this is ridiculous. He's been to site. He's written the valuation. All we're doing is chopping up the individual flats based on the valuations that he's already given for those flats. Why the hell does he need to visit site again? And after a couple of days of back and forth, they came back and said, oh, actually, yeah, fine. We can do it remotely. I'm like, well, of course you can. Like, why have we wasted 3 or 4 days having this conversation when it's completely obvious that that's the case? But yeah, definitely challenge banks, challenge surveyors, challenge everything.
If this video resonates with you and you can take away just one thing that makes your business better, then creating this video would have been a success. If you aren't getting value, click the subscribe button down below. It would mean so much. Back to the video.
Just a quick update on the doctor's surgery conversion that we talked about. We finished that a while ago, like I said, and we've had it on the lettings market for what now? Probably only about 2 weeks, but we are smashing the lettings ceiling that we anticipated.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to touch on here, really. It took us forever to get this thing to point of letting because of building control delays and various things that we were waiting on, but we finally got there and got the building control sign off, got the marketing out. One learning that we actually felt from this one is we in theory think it's best to launch on spare room. These are cluster HMOs, so it's 5 flats, 4 of which are 3-bed HMOs, and we let them out per room. So we think typically it's best to launch the spare room once you're literally ready for someone to walk in, but then also you're missing out on the market of people that are viewing before you actually launch that ad. So it's a really difficult decision to make of when do you launch. And we did launch this a bit early because we thought we would be getting the approvals a lot sooner, but we didn't. So essentially, the reason I wanted to share this is we've now had successes. We've let 9 of the 14 rooms. We're now on target to hit £131,000 per year as a gross revenue. Our targets originally were £121,000 per year. So we've actually smashed our targets, which is testament to design, construction, lettings team, all of the teams that have worked in that to get those results, which is great. But also I wanted to touch on, as we've had 2 valuations on this site, one from Vale Williams and one from Allied, and the 2 valuations that they have put in their Red Book valuation, the proven evidence is we're at 120. So Vale Williams were at 82,800 per year, and Allied were at £87,000 per year. So our estimations were £40,000 more. Are actually likely achieved is going to be £50,000 more, which is a huge discrepancy. And I wanted to share that just to show that a valuation isn't everything. A valuation should be a fair testament on the market, and this evidently isn't. It's people just being scared. You can see that their actual Red Book total valuation, Vale was £1 million, and then we weren't happy with that, so we went with Allied, who were 1.275. We're actually still not really happy with that, but it's enough to get the deal done and get it refinanced, which is more important now. But it just goes to show that actually what you achieve can be so far removed from what valuers. And the funny thing is, I'd be amazed if they still come back at 87,000 because we've sent them these letted units. So now they've got proven evidence of ASTs in place, and we actually have our first tenant moving in Monday to show that that is the market value.
Nice. I mean, just based on that, it's a 10.3% yield on what they valued it at. So 131 grand divided by the 1.275 million that they've valued it at, just over a 10% yield that we'll be achieving on that valuation. So if they were to actually value it on an investment yield of even 8%, they should be adding a couple of $100,000 onto that valuation. But we've only been able to achieve this because we are letting out, rooms individually. We're running those small kind of 3-bedroom HMO kind of cluster flat type model. Great way of sort of supercharging your rental income. The negatives of doing that is that obviously as a single let, it would be onto the owner to pay council tax and bills and all stuff like that. we're taking that responsibility as the HMO investor landlord. But in terms of the gross rent that comes in based on letting them individually as opposed to a individual single let, it's still well worth setting it up in this way and taking the burden of the utilities, etc., because it's more profitable for us.
If you got value from this video, make sure you click the subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell, because we release one video at least every week, so you'll be the first to get notified. See you on the next one.